Preparing the mind. Now, I apologize that this particular blog is going to be kind of didactic and explanatory, and it's my hope that understanding a little about how the Tibetans approach the Bardo state is going to be useful for some of you. Many Buddhists have a dilemma that's worth our understanding. On the one hand, we follow the Dharma path to awareness and enlightenment as taught to us by the historical Buddha. However, we are not yet enlightened. We're not there yet, which suggests that our practice is to be continued in another life. In order to continue our practice, we actually have to merit another human rebirth. And the Buddhists suggest that the human realm is the best, pretty much the only realm to practice Dharma. However, just because we are human right now does not guarantee that we will achieve a human birth in our next life. That depends on what we do in this life. We could very easily blow this lifetime's opportunity and due to our increased karma be reborn as an animal or even something lower or higher. Neither the lower realms nor the higher realms are conducive to Dharma practice and enlightenment. I hope you see the problem, and let me explain more. In a perfect world, the teachings of the Buddha, if we follow them, and if we practice them, should theoretically ensure that we cannot reach enlightenment, that if we cannot reach enlightenment in this life, that we can continue on the Dharma path in our next life, provided we merit and achieve another human rebirth. But the Buddha's teachings also include being reborn in many realms, some of which could last for a very, very long time. Naturally, we assume that should we not achieve enlightenment in this life, very likely for most of us, we're not, but we'll surely make some progress, real progress in our next life, in our next human life. The rub is that there's no guarantee we'll have another opportunity like this. That we'll get a human life anytime soon. So this is something to consider. And although we're practicing Dharma, it's understandable that a certain amount of our attention may be paid as to how to ensure a human rebirth next lifetime. In other words, we don't have undivided attention in our Dharma practice, but rather a little divided. And we're going to get to this issue later on. With this concern in mind, though, let's continue looking at the Bardo experience. A significant amount of all Buddhist meditation practices are done to better prepare the mind of each of us for that singular moment of death and the coming to face with the true nature of our own mind. And here's the crucial point. We don't have to wait until we die to begin recognizing the true nature of our mind. We can do it right here in this lifetime, right now. Of course, that's just exactly what the Buddha did. As I like to say, we can go to meet our Maker. We can train for this coming after-death experience, and that is what many forms of meditation are all about, or at least lead to, which is recognizing the true nature of the mind. All that remains is for us to take steps to learn how to do this, and that's, of course, is what meditation practice is all about. In fact, the closer we can come to recognizing the true nature of our mind in this, our waking life, the greater chance we have of recognizing that same nature in the after-death state, the Bardos, and thus achieving a more enlightened state, one in which we see clearly ourselves. We see clearly, and we can also begin to benefit others as well. With true mind recognition, we won't turn away into a darker place, a womb, for example, but will instead walk directly on and embrace the light and realize our mind's true nature from that point forward. This is what the teachings say. As for what happens then, it would require a whole book, and I'm certainly not aware enough to even write it. I'm no expert, and I still have lots of questions myself, and I'm trying to explain some of this to readers so that we can discuss it. And I should point out that this kind of after-death experience does not seem restricted just to Tibetan Buddhists. The Buddhists are quick to say that these after-death experiences, just as they are described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, will appear to all of us, regardless of religious upbringing, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and so on. It's not just a Buddhist thing. And now I should mention what's called Pure Land Buddhism. Earlier, I mentioned how the attention of a Dharma practitioner can be divided between the historical Dharma of the Buddha and this awakening possibility at the time of our death. And also our concern for being reborn in our next life as a human. It's a little more complicated than that, so here goes. In many Asian countries, there's what amounts to a cult of devotees who are practicing the meditation techniques that we've been mentioning here and who want to achieve liberation at the moment they enter the Bardo. And by that realization, to thereby skip the Bardo states described above and to go straight on to being a realized being at one level or another. Sounds good. This is the principal concern of what are called the Pure Land school of Buddhists, Pure Land Buddhism. And I need to at least introduce you to this concept of the Pure Lands, or what are also called the Buddha fields, because it explains a whole lot about this movement in Asia. So, in brief, a Buddha field, or what's called a Pure Land, is a realm spontaneously produced by the sheer merit of a Buddha achieving enlightenment. It's a place where enlightened beings can go and congregate. And there are a great many Buddha fields, and it's considered very advantageous for each of us to ultimately get there. To get to this place, it's a place where we can most benefit other people and also ourselves. Sounds a lot like heaven, doesn't it? But that being said, there's one Buddha field that is traditionally the easiest to get into. Why it's easy is a long story. But in brief, one particular Buddha, this is Amitabha Buddha, aspired deeply that his Buddha field be accessible to almost anyone who wished and aspired to reach it. And so it is. Even ordinary people who aspire to this realm, they can get it, they can get in, they can obtain it. And this particular Buddha field is called in Sanskrit Sukhavati. And in Tibetan it's called Dewa Chen. It is, for the reasons mentioned above, the most popular Buddha field because any of us can aspire to go there and also actually have a chance of achieving that goal, even if we are not fully realized or enlightened right now. Otherwise, it can take many, many lifetimes, perhaps even entire kalpas, which are endlessly long times, millions of years, to become enlightened and reach one of the Buddha fields. By going to a Buddha field, we cease to take births, and instead we are enlightened and can be of great help to all other beings. This form of Buddhism that wants to reach Dewa Chen, Sukhavati, is called Pure Land Buddhism. And it is, like in one form or another, immensely popular in China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and of course Tibet. By understanding something about the idea of Dewa Chen, perhaps you can begin to see the great concern with the Bardo states, in particular why the Bardo of becoming, the one that we enter soon after dying, is so important to Buddhists, because it is at this point of death that if we are mentally and spiritually prepared, we can recognize the true nature of our mind and pass directly into the Buddha field of Dewa Chen, bypassing the various bardos and ceasing to be reborn. My comment is nice work if you can get it. I mentioned earlier that there can be two separate but related kinds of Dharma practice going on here. And this is the rub. On the one hand, there's the traditional path to enlightenment that the Buddha pointed out, and on the other, the more immediate need to do enough Dharma practice this lifetime to either become enlightened in the Bardo, or if that doesn't work, at the very least to once again merit having a human rebirth and not to be reborn in still lower realms like an animal, where we can't practice Dharma. As you can see, both paths are related, but also the worry to be liberated in the Bardo right after death can take up a lot of the energy we might otherwise have used to attain just regular total enlightenment, just as Buddha did. So it's a kind of a catch-22. As my teacher has often pointed out, we are, those of us living today, all of the souls, or whatever we want to call us, who have never up till now, through all of the millennia, managed to stop ignoring the way things actually are long enough to become enlightened. We are, as he points out, the stragglers, the hard cases, the dregs. So this is a brief account of the urgency to get to Dewa Chen, the nearest and most accessible Buddha field, any port in a storm, that idea, in samsara. And since the main entrance to Dewa Chen is at the beginning of the Bardo, shortly after death, this explains some of the concern and study of the Bardo. What happens to those of us who can't get on board that train to Dewa Chen? What happens to us? That's probably most of us. Well, Dewa Chen aside, that is what all the rest of the tradition of the Bardo states is all about. If you don't make it to Dewa Chen, if you don't get it at the entrance door, if you can't get into the Pure Land, and you turn away from the bright lights, if you don't recognize the true nature of the mind, and you turn back into ignorance, then you enter what's called the Bardo of becoming, and eventually you take another life, and not necessarily as a human being, as I pointed out. This fact induces a certain urgency to practice. This is not the place, and I'm not the expert you need to properly describe in great detail the various Bardo realms. I am only sharing what I understand of all this. I wish I were an expert, and that all of us were enlightened, including me. Perhaps this is enough for now, and I hope that at least it's been somewhat understandable.